I found out my best friend was sleeping with my husband when I saw her wearing my wedding earrings at my daughter's birthday party. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you gave them keys to your house, your heart, and your deepest secrets? I did. Her name was Emma, and she was my best friend for 12 years. What I didn't know was that she'd been sleeping with my husband for 8 months, planning my daughter's birthday party while planning to destroy my marriage. The discovery happened on a Saturday afternoon in May, during what should have been the happiest day of my 7-year-old daughter's life. 23 children running through our backyard, pink balloons tied to every fence post, a princess castle cake that had taken me 3 days to perfect. But when I saw what she was wearing around her neck, my perfect world shattered in an instant. My name is Harper. I'm 34 years old, and until that moment, I thought I had everything figured out. A loving husband of 9 years, a beautiful daughter named Lily, and a best friend who I considered the sister I'd never had. Emma and I had met in college, roommates who became inseparable. She was the maid of honor at my wedding, the first person I called when I found out I was pregnant, the godmother to my daughter. I trusted her with everything. I gave her spare keys to our house, made her Lily's emergency contact, and never questioned why she was always available when I needed her. If you've ever had a friendship so deep you couldn't imagine life without that person, you know the foundation my life was built on. If you've ever trusted someone with your most precious relationships, you'll understand why what happened next didn't just break my heart. It broke my ability to trust my own judgment. Hit that like button if you believe some betrayals are unforgivable, and subscribe because this story is about what happens when your closest friend becomes your worst enemy. The earrings were my grandmother's pearl drops, passed down through 4 generations of women in my family. My great-grandmother had worn them to her wedding in 1943. My grandmother had worn them when she married my grandfather after he returned from World War II. My mother had worn them at her wedding, and I had worn them on the most important day of my life. They were more than jewelry. They were a symbol of love, commitment, and family legacy. When I'd gotten married, my mother had placed them in my ears with tears in her eyes, whispering, "Now you're carrying all our love with you." Emma knew their significance because she'd been there when my mother gave them to me, holding my veil while I cried happy tears. The party was in full swing when I noticed them. Emma was bending down to help Lily open a present, her honey blonde hair falling to one side, and there they were, my grandmother's pearls, catching the afternoon sunlight, glowing against her neck like they belonged there. For a moment, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Those earrings lived in my jewelry box, in the velvet-lined compartment my mother had given me specifically for family heirlooms. They weren't costume jewelry you could buy at a store. They were one-of-a-kind, custom-made pieces with a distinctive setting that my great-grandfather had designed himself. There was no possibility of mistake, no chance of coincidence. Emma was wearing my wedding earrings to my daughter's birthday party, but the earrings were just the beginning of what I was about to discover. Because when someone betrays you once, you start seeing all the times they betrayed you before. Before I tell you how I discovered that my best friend had been systematically destroying my marriage, let me tell you who we were before the betrayal changed everything. Emma and I weren't just friends. We were the kind of friends people envied, the kind that made other people wish they had what we had. I'm Harper, and 12 years ago, I was a 22-year-old college senior majoring in elementary education when Emma transferred to our school. She was studying marketing, bubbly and confident in ways I'd never been, with the kind of magnetic personality that drew people to her effortlessly. We became roommates by accident. Her original housing had fallen through, and I needed help with rent. But within weeks, we were inseparable. Emma was the outgoing one who convinced me to go to parties and try new things. I was the steady one who helped her study and talked her through family drama. She used to say I was the sister she'd never had, and I believed her completely. When I met David during our senior year, Emma was the first person I called to tell her about the cute guy from my education program who'd asked me to coffee. She squealed with excitement, demanded every detail, and helped me pick out outfits for our first 3 dates. "He's perfect for you, Harper," she'd said, watching me get ready for date number 4. "You balance each other out. He's lucky to have someone as genuine as you." David was everything I'd dreamed of in a partner: kind, stable, ambitious, and completely devoted to me. He was studying to become a high school history teacher, and we'd spend hours talking about our future classrooms, our future students, our future life together. Emma was there for every milestone. She helped me pick out the dress I wore when David first said he loved me. She was my roommate for 2 years after college when David and I were saving money for our wedding. She helped me address invitations, tasted cake flavors, and held my hand during the stress-filled moments of wedding planning. When David proposed, Emma cried harder than I did. "I'm so happy for you," she'd sobbed, hugging me tight. "You two are going to have the most beautiful life together." Looking back, I wonder if those tears were happiness or if she was already planning to take what I had. Our wedding was everything I'd dreamed of. Emma stood beside me as my maid of honor, looking radiant in the dusty pink dress we'd chosen together. In the photos, we're both glowing. Me with bridal joy, her with what I thought was pure happiness for my success. After the wedding, Emma and I maintained our friendship despite the natural changes that come with marriage. She was the friend I called when David and I had our first real fight. She was the one who brought me ice cream and listened to me worry about fertility when we'd been trying to have a baby for 8 months. When I finally got pregnant, Emma was the second person to know, right after David. She held me while I cried, happy tears, and immediately started planning the baby shower. "I'm going to be the best godmother ever," she promised, her hands on my barely there bump. "This baby is going to be so spoiled." She kept that promise, but not in the way any of us expected. Emma was at the hospital when Lily was born, pacing the waiting room with David's parents, crying when she first held my daughter. She was the friend who brought groceries during those exhausting newborn weeks, who held Lily so I could shower, who never seemed to mind when plans got canceled because of baby schedules. As Lily grew, Emma became like family. She had her own key to our house, her own coffee mug in our kitchen, her own spot on our couch for movie nights. Lily called her Aunt Emma and ran to her with the same excitement she showed when David came home from work. Emma was the friend who remembered every important date: anniversaries, birthdays, the anniversary of my mother's death. She brought flowers on Mother's Day and thoughtful gifts at Christmas. She was the person I trusted to watch Lily when David and I needed a date night. She was also the person I confided in when marriage got difficult, as all marriages sometimes do. When David and I went through a rough patch during Lily's toddler years, the normal stress of parenting, money worries, the challenge of maintaining romance while raising a child, Emma was my sounding board. "All marriages go through this," she'd reassure me during our weekly coffee dates. "David loves you. You just need to reconnect." She'd offer to babysit more often, encouraging David and me to spend time together. She'd suggest date ideas and remind me to appreciate what I had. "You're so lucky, Harper," she'd say wistfully. "David is such a good husband and father. Some of us are still looking for what you found." I felt sorry for Emma sometimes. She dated, but nothing ever seemed to stick. She'd have relationships that lasted a few months, then end them because the guy wasn't ready for commitment or didn't want children. "I want what you have," she'd tell me. "A real partnership, a family, someone who loves me the way David loves you." I never imagined she was planning to take it. The first crack in my perfect friendship happened 3 months before the birthday party, during what I thought was just Emma being helpful. Sometimes the kindest gestures hide the cruelest intentions. It started when I got the flu in February, the kind that knocks you flat for a week. Lily had brought it home from school, and while she recovered quickly, it hit me like a truck. I was bedridden with a fever, barely able to keep water down, let alone take care of a 7-year-old. Emma, being the amazing friend I thought she was, immediately offered to help. "Don't be ridiculous," she said when I tried to protest. "I'll pick up Lily from school and stay with her until David gets home. You need to rest." For 3 days, Emma essentially moved into our house. She'd arrive in the morning with soup and medicine, take Lily to school, come back to check on me during lunch, then return to pick up Lily and stay until David finished work. I was grateful then, but now I realize she was auditioning for my life. On the third day, I woke up feeling slightly better and decided to come downstairs for the first time in days. The house was quiet. Emma had taken Lily to the park, so I made myself tea and sat at the kitchen table, enjoying the silence. That's when I noticed David's coffee mug in the sink. It was the mug I'd bought him for our anniversary 2 years earlier, with "World's Best Dad" printed on the side. Lily had picked it out, and David used it every morning without fail. But David left for work at 7 a.m., and it was now 2 p.m. The mug should have been long washed and put away, but it was sitting in the sink with fresh coffee stains, still slightly warm to the touch. I stood there holding that mug, trying to understand why my husband would have been home drinking coffee in the middle of a school day when he was supposed to be teaching. When Emma returned with Lily, I asked casually, "Did David come home for lunch today?" Emma looked surprised. "David? No, why would you think that?" I pointed to the mug. "This was used recently." Emma glanced at it and shrugged. "Oh, that. Yeah, I used it this morning. I hope that's okay?" I couldn't find the regular mugs and was desperate for caffeine. Her explanation made sense. I was sick, my brain was foggy, and I was probably being paranoid. But something about her tone felt off. Too casual, too quick. Trust your instincts, even when they whisper warnings about people you love. The second crack came a week later when I was finally healthy enough to resume normal activities. Emma had been such a help during my illness that I wanted to do something nice for her, so I decided to surprise her with lunch at her favorite restaurant. I knew Emma worked from home on Fridays, doing freelance marketing projects, so I figured she'd appreciate the interruption. I bought sandwiches from the deli she loved and drove to her apartment around noon. Her car wasn't in her usual parking spot, which was strange since she'd told me the day before that she was swamped with client work and would be home all day Friday. I called her phone. "Hey, Harper." Emma's voice was bright, but I could hear traffic in the background. "What's up?" "I'm at your apartment with lunch," I said. "Where are you?" There was a pause. Just a second too long. "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I had to run an emergency errand for a client. I should have texted you. Can we rain check?" Again, her explanation was reasonable. Freelancers have unpredictable schedules. But the background noise I was hearing didn't sound like errand running. It sounded like a restaurant. The clatter of silverware, the murmur of conversation. I was probably overthinking things. Emma was allowed to have lunch out, allowed to change her plans, allowed to have a life that didn't revolve around giving me detailed updates. But for the first time in 12 years of friendship, I found myself questioning whether Emma was telling me the truth. When people start lying about small things, it's because they're hiding something big. The third crack was the most unsettling, and it happened just 2 weeks before Lily's birthday party. David had been working late more often, staying after school for meetings and grading papers. It was unusual, but not unprecedented. Teachers often had busy periods, especially in the spring when state testing and end-of-year activities ramped up. One evening, after David texted to say he'd be home late again, I decided to surprise him with dinner. I packed up Lily and drove to the school around 7 p.m., thinking we could bring him food and maybe convince him to come home for a family movie night. The school parking lot was nearly empty except for the night custodian's truck and one other car. David's car wasn't there. I called him. "Hey, honey." David answered, but his voice sounded strange, slightly out of breath, with background noise that definitely wasn't a quiet classroom. I'm at the school with dinner, I said. Where are you? Another pause. Another second too long. Oh, we moved the meeting to Jerry's house, David said. You know, the department head? We're working on curriculum planning. Jerry was David's supervisor, and it made sense that they'd work at his house sometimes. But something about David's tone reminded me of Emma's voice when I'd caught her not being where she said she'd be. As we drove home, Lily chatted about her day, but I found myself thinking about patterns. David working late, Emma being unavailable, small lies that didn't quite add up. I told myself I was being paranoid, that stress and exhaustion were making me suspicious of the two people I trusted most in the world. But deep down, I was starting to understand that my perfect life might not be as perfect as I thought. For the next month, I became a detective in my own life, watching the two people I loved most without them knowing I was watching. Sometimes the truth hides in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to really look. I started paying attention to details I'd always ignored. The timing of phone calls, the reasons for schedule changes, the way Emma and David interacted when we were all together. During our usual Friday night gatherings, when Emma would come over for dinner and movie nights, I began noticing things that had been there all along but had never registered as suspicious. The way Emma always seemed to know what David wanted to drink before he asked. How she'd laugh at his jokes just a beat too long. The fact that she'd position herself on the couch where she could see David's face instead of focusing on the movie. I'd always thought Emma was just naturally attentive, but attention and obsession can look very similar. I started checking David's phone when he left it charging in the kitchen. Nothing dramatic, just glancing at recent calls and messages while I cleaned up dinner dishes. Most of what I found was normal. Texts with his coworkers, calls to his parents, the occasional message to me about grocery lists or pickup times for Lily. But there were gaps. Times when David said he'd been at school or running errands, but his phone showed no activity. No calls, no texts, no app usage, as if he'd turned it off completely or left it somewhere while he was doing something else. People don't turn off their phones for grocery shopping or staff meetings. The week before Lily's birthday party, I decided to test my suspicions with a small experiment. I told Emma that David and I were planning a surprise date night for our anniversary, which was still 2 months away. I made up a story about reservations at an expensive restaurant and asked if she could babysit Lily on Saturday evening. Of course, Emma said immediately. You know I love spending time with Lily. What time do you need me? 6 o'clock, I said. We're hoping to have dinner and maybe catch a late movie. Perfect. I'll bring her favorite pizza and we can have a girls' night. Then I told David about our fictional anniversary date, saying Emma had offered to babysit so we could go out. That's sweet of her, David said, but something flickered across his face. Disappointment? Frustration? But actually, I forgot I have that thing on Saturday night. What thing? Remember? I told you about the conference call with the district administrators. It's about the budget for next year. David had never mentioned any conference call, and district budget meetings don't happen on Saturday nights. Can't you reschedule it? I asked. Emma's already planning to come over. I really can't, David said. It's been scheduled for weeks. Saturday evening came, and I told Emma that David's work conflict meant we had to cancel our date night. Oh no, she said, and her disappointment seemed genuine. Well, I'm still happy to watch Lily if you want to have some alone time. Maybe do some shopping or see a friend? I accepted her offer and left the house around 6:30. But instead of going shopping, I parked 2 blocks away and walked back through our neighborhood. Sometimes you have to become someone you don't recognize to discover who the people you love really are. Our house was on a corner lot with large windows facing the street. From across the road, I could see into our living room where Emma was sitting on our couch with Lily, watching a Disney movie and sharing a bowl of popcorn. Everything looked normal, innocent, exactly what it should look like when a loving godmother babysits her best friend's daughter. I was about to leave, feeling foolish for doubting the people I loved, when David's car turned onto our street. He parked in our driveway like he lived there, which, of course, he did. But he was supposed to be on a conference call about school budget meetings. I watched from behind a neighbor's fence as David used his key to enter our house. Through the windows, I saw Emma jump up from the couch with what looked like excitement. They hugged. A long hug, longer than a casual greeting between friends. Then David kissed her. Not on the cheek. Not the quick peck you might give a family friend. A real kiss. Passionate and intimate and completely wrong. In that moment, watching my husband kiss my best friend in my living room while my daughter watched cartoons 3 feet away, I finally understood that betrayal doesn't announce itself with dramatic music and obvious villains. It happens quietly, in familiar places, by people who smile at you over dinner and ask about your day and remember your coffee order. It happens when the person you trust most in the world sits on your couch, eating your food, watching your child, and planning to steal your life. I stood there for another 10 minutes, watching them move around my house like they belonged there together. Watching Emma refill David's coffee cup without being asked. Watching David stroke Emma's hair while Lily was focused on the movie screen. Watching my marriage die in my own living room. When I finally walked back to my car, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely start the engine. But I wasn't crying yet. The tears would come later. Right then, I was just calculating. How long had this been going on? How many times had they done this? How many lies had I believed? How many times had I thanked Emma for being such a wonderful friend while she was sleeping with my husband? But most importantly, I was planning what I was going to do about it. Because discovering a betrayal is just the beginning. The real question is what you do with that knowledge. I didn't confront them that night. Instead, I went home 3 hours later, acting like I'd been shopping, and watched them perform their innocent friendship act while my daughter slept upstairs. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people think they're getting away with something while you plan their destruction. "How was your conference call?" I asked David as Emma gathered her purse to leave. "Long and boring," he said, without missing a beat. "Budget stuff is never exciting." Emma hugged me goodbye. Lily was an angel, as always. Thanks for letting me steal some time with her. I hugged her back, smelling David's cologne on her sweater. For the next week, I became someone I'd never been before. Calculated, strategic, patient. I needed evidence, not just the emotional devastation of witnessing their betrayal. I needed proof that would matter in divorce court, in custody battles, in the court of public opinion where our shared friends would have to choose sides. When people betray you, they've already chosen to play dirty. The only question is whether you're willing to play dirtier. I installed a security app on my phone that let me access our home cameras remotely. I told David it was for security when we were away, and he agreed it was a good idea. What I didn't mention was that I could now watch our living room from anywhere, anytime. I started taking pictures of David's phone when he left it unattended, scrolling through his recent calls and messages just long enough to document the timestamps and contact information. Most of his communication with Emma was happening through an app I'd never heard of, one that automatically deleted messages after they were read. That discovery made my stomach twist. People don't use disappearing messages for innocent conversations. The first real confrontation happened by accident, triggered by something I hadn't planned for. Lily came home from school on a Thursday afternoon with a craft project, a Mother's Day card she'd made in art class. It was construction paper with crayon drawings and her 7-year-old handwriting spelling out, "Best Mom Ever," in purple marker. But as she showed it to me, she said something that made my blood run cold. "I made one for Aunt Emma, too," Lily announced proudly. She said she wished someone would make her a Mother's Day card, so I made her one that says, like a mom, because she takes care of me like you do. Children see everything, even when we think we're protecting them from adult complications. When did Aunt Emma say that, sweetheart? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Last week when she picked me up from school. She was crying a little bit, and I asked why, and she said she was sad because she wanted to be a mom, but it was complicated. Emma had picked up Lily from school? That hadn't been planned. I'd been at a doctor's appointment and David was supposed to get her. Did Daddy ask Aunt Emma to pick you up? No. Aunt Emma said Daddy called her because something came up at work. We went to her house for a while, and then Daddy came to get me there instead of our house. I felt like I was going to be sick. They were using my daughter as cover for their affair, creating opportunities to be together by involving her in their deception. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I confronted David. Lily told me Emma picked her up from school last week, I said while we were cleaning up the kitchen. David's hand paused on the dish he was washing. Yeah, I had a last-minute meeting and couldn't get her. Emma offered to help. You didn't mention it to me. I didn't think it was a big deal. Emma picks up Lily sometimes. Not without discussing it with me first. She's our daughter, David. Childcare decisions should involve both parents. David turned to face me, and for the first time in 9 years of marriage, I saw genuine anger in his eyes. Not frustration or annoyance, real anger, directed at me. Are you seriously going to make this into a fight? Emma helped us out when we needed it. She's been nothing but supportive of our family. Our family, I repeated. Is that what this is? Something in my tone must have warned him, because his expression changed from anger to caution. What's that supposed to mean? This was the moment I could have said everything, confronted him with what I'd seen, demanded the truth, forced the crisis into the open. But I wasn't ready yet. I didn't have enough evidence to protect myself and Lily from whatever was coming, and I was beginning to understand that David wasn't the same man I'd married. This version of my husband was someone who could lie smoothly, use our daughter as an alibi, and get angry at me for asking reasonable questions about our child's care. It means I think we need better communication about Lily's schedule, I said finally. David studied my face for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that he was trying to figure out how much I knew. You're right, he said eventually. I should have called you first. It won't happen again. But we both knew he was lying. And for the first time, I think David knew that I knew he was lying. The game had changed, even if neither of us was ready to admit it yet. Sometimes the most dangerous moment in a betrayal is when the betrayer realizes they might get caught, because that's when they stop being careful and start being desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. The full truth came out exactly where this story began, at my daughter's 7th birthday party, when I saw my grandmother's pearl earrings hanging from my best friend's ears. Sometimes the universe forces revelations at the worst possible moments, as if truth itself has a sense of dramatic timing. The party was perfect until that moment. 23 children running through our backyard, parents chatting over coffee and cake, Lily glowing with birthday joy in her princess dress. I'd spent weeks planning every detail, and everything was going exactly as I'd hoped. Emma had arrived early to help set up, as she always did for Lily's special occasions. She'd brought an expensive doll that Lily had been wanting, wrapped in shimmery paper with an elaborate bow. You spoil her, I'd said, hugging Emma in gratitude. She's my goddaughter, Emma had replied. She deserves to be spoiled. For 3 hours, I watched Emma play the role of loving godmother and devoted best friend. She helped serve cake, organized games for the children, and took dozens of photos of Lily opening presents. She was wearing a blue sundress I'd never seen before, her hair styled in loose waves, looking beautiful and happy and completely innocent. until I saw the earrings. Recognition hit me like a physical blow, not just seeing my family heirlooms, but understanding what it meant that she was wearing them. Those earrings weren't something you borrowed casually. They lived in my jewelry box, in the special compartment with my most precious pieces. You couldn't access them without deliberately going through my personal belongings. But more than that, wearing them required knowledge of their significance. Emma knew they were my wedding earrings, knew they'd been passed down through generations, knew they represented everything sacred about marriage and family commitment. She was wearing them to my daughter's birthday party like a trophy. I excused myself from the group of parents I'd been chatting with and walked calmly to my bedroom. My jewelry box sat on my dresser, exactly where it always was. I opened the velvet-lined compartment where my grandmother's earrings should have been. Empty. My hands shook as I checked the other compartments, thinking maybe I'd moved them and forgotten. But I knew I hadn't. I never moved those earrings. They had their specific place, and they'd been there 3 days ago when I'd opened the box to get my watch. Standing in my own bedroom, staring at the empty space where my family's most precious jewelry should have been, I finally understood the scope of what Emma had been taking from me. It wasn't just my husband. It wasn't just my marriage. She'd been systematically inserting herself into every aspect of my life, taking pieces of my identity and making them her own. I walked back to the party in a daze, watching Emma laugh with the other mothers, watching her push Lily on the swing, watching her hand David a slice of cake with a smile that looked genuine and loving and completely false. When the last guest left and we were cleaning up the backyard, I finally spoke. "Emma, those are beautiful earrings," I said casually. "Where did you get them?" Emma's hand flew instinctively to her ear, touching the pearls with her fingertips. "Oh, these old things?" she said with a laugh that sounded forced. "I've had them forever. Family jewelry, you know how it is." Family jewelry. She was claiming my grandmother's earrings as her own family heirlooms. "They look exactly like the ones my grandmother gave me," I continued, my voice still calm. "The same setting, the same pearl shape, almost identical." "Well, you know how pearl earrings are," Emma said, beginning to gather empty paper plates with slightly frantic energy. "They all look similar." David was loading folding chairs into our garage and didn't seem to be paying attention to our conversation. Lily was inside, exhausted from her party, probably falling asleep on the couch. This was my moment, the choice between continuing to pretend or forcing the truth into the open. "Emma," I said quietly, "those are my earrings." She froze, a stack of paper plates halfway to the trash bag. "That's impossible," she said, but her voice had changed. The casual confidence was gone, replaced by something sharper. "These are mine. They're my grandmother's earrings, the ones I wore at my wedding, the ones that live in my jewelry box." Emma straightened up, and for the first time in 12 years of friendship, I saw her real face. Not the warm, supportive friend I thought I knew. Someone harder, colder, calculating. "I don't know what you're implying, Harper, but I don't appreciate being accused of stealing." "I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you directly. You're wearing my wedding earrings to my daughter's birthday party." The silence stretched between us, filled with 7 years of accumulated lies and betrayals and stolen moments. Finally, Emma reached up and removed the earrings, holding them out to me with a gesture that looked like generosity but felt like mockery. "If you're so sure they're yours, take them," she said. "But this conversation says more about your state of mind than it does about my character." I took the earrings, feeling their familiar weight in my palm. "My state of mind," I repeated. "You've been different lately? Suspicious? Paranoid? Maybe you should talk to someone about that." In that moment, watching Emma try to gaslight me while holding the evidence of her theft in my hand, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my best friend had been a performance. The only thing I need to talk about, I said calmly, is how long you've been sleeping with my husband. Emma's face went completely white. And that's when I knew that the birthday party was just the beginning of the worst day of my life. Emma didn't deny it. That's how I knew, with absolute certainty, that my marriage was over. Sometimes the absence of denial tells you everything you need to know about the presence of guilt. Harper, she said quietly, glancing toward the garage where David was still organizing party supplies. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is how long it's been going on and what I'm going to do about it. Emma's composure cracked completely. The confident, supportive friend disappeared, replaced by someone desperate and panicked. Please don't do this, she whispered. Think about Lily. Think about your family. I am thinking about my family. That's why I'm going to protect what's left of it. I walked into the house, leaving Emma standing in our backyard holding a trash bag full of birthday party debris. David was in the garage, and Lily was asleep on the living room couch, still in her princess dress, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and new toys. Looking at my daughter, innocent, trusting, completely unaware that her world was about to change, I felt something I'd never experienced before. A cold, calculating fury that had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with survival. That night, I discovered that heartbreak can make you weak, but protecting your child can make you unstoppable. I carried Lily to her bedroom, changed her into pajamas, and tucked her into bed. She stirred just enough to whisper, "Best birthday ever, Mommy." "I'm glad, baby," I whispered back, kissing her forehead. "I love you more than anything." "More than Daddy?" The innocent question hit me like a punch to the chest. "I love you and Daddy in different ways," I said carefully, "but you are the most important thing in my whole world." When I came back downstairs, David was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. Emma had left without saying goodbye. "Where did Emma go?" David asked casually. "She had somewhere else to be," I said. For the next hour, we cleaned up the party remains in near silence. David seemed normal, tired but content, making casual comments about the day, mentioning which kids had enjoyed which activities. But I was watching him differently now, seeing him through the lens of betrayal, the way he checked his phone multiple times, the way he seemed distracted despite the mundane conversation, the way he avoided making eye contact for more than a few seconds. Once you know someone is lying to you, you start seeing their deception in everything they do. That night, after David fell asleep, I went to my computer and began researching divorce law, child custody requirements, and financial asset protection. I spent hours reading about adultery evidence, property division, and how affairs affected custody arrangements. I learned that text messages, emails, photos, and witness testimony could all be used as evidence. I learned that financial records showing unusual spending or gifts could support adultery claims. I learned that the best time to gather evidence was before the cheating spouse knew they'd been discovered. Most importantly, I learned that I needed to protect myself financially before David realized I knew about the affair. Knowledge is power, but only if you act on it before your enemies realize what you know. Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone I'd never been before: strategic, secretive, and completely focused on protecting Lily and myself from the fallout that was coming. I made copies of all our financial documents: bank statements, investment accounts, mortgage papers, insurance policies. I photographed David's credit card statements, documenting charges at restaurants and hotels during times when he'd told me he was at work. I opened my own checking account at a different bank and began transferring small amounts of money. Not enough to be obvious, but enough to have resources if I needed them quickly. I researched family law attorneys and scheduled consultations with 3 different firms, paying cash so there would be no credit card trail for David to discover. But the most important thing I did was install a voice-activated recording app on my phone and begin documenting every conversation, every lie, every moment when David's story didn't match his actions. Emma tried to call me 4 times during those 2 weeks. I didn't answer. She sent texts asking if I was okay, if we could talk, if I was angry about something. I didn't respond. Let her panic. Let her wonder what I was planning. Let her realize that stealing someone's marriage might have consequences she hadn't considered. The best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting prepared. David began asking why Emma hadn't been around lately. I think she's dating someone new. I lied smoothly. She's been busy. That's good for her, David said, but something in his tone suggested it wasn't good for him. 2 weeks after the birthday party, Emma showed up at my door. We need to talk, she said. Yes, I agreed, opening the door wider. We absolutely do. But what Emma didn't know was that our conversation was going to be very different from what she expected. Because she thought she was coming to apologize, or explain, or convince me to keep her secret. But I wasn't interested in any of those things. I was interested in justice. Emma came to my house on a Tuesday afternoon when she knew David was at school and Lily was at ballet class. She thought she was coming to manage the damage she'd caused. She had no idea she was walking into the beginning of her complete social destruction. Harper, I need you to know how sorry I am, she began before I'd even closed the front door. What happened between David and me was never supposed to hurt you. I led her to the living room, the same room where I'd watched her kiss my husband 2 weeks earlier. My phone was already recording in my pocket. How long? I asked simply. Emma sat on the edge of our couch, twisting her hands in her lap. It started about 8 months ago. It wasn't planned. It just happened. 8 months. I repeated the timeline, calculating. That's when you started coming over more often, when you offered to help with Lily more frequently. Harper, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. You used my daughter as an excuse to spend time with my husband. You sat at my dinner table, played with my child, and planned to steal my life. The recording was capturing every word, every admission, every detail that would matter in divorce court. It wasn't like that, Emma said desperately. David and we connected. We have so much in common. We understand each other. You understand each other. I kept my voice flat, emotionless. Is that what you call adultery now? You don't understand how unhappy he's been, Emma said, and suddenly her desperation shifted to something uglier. Your marriage has been in trouble for years. David feels trapped, unappreciated. You take him for granted. There it was. The blame shift I'd been waiting for. The attempt to make their betrayal my fault. So you decided to help him feel appreciated by sleeping with him in my house while my daughter was upstairs. Emma's face flushed red. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. How was it supposed to happen? What was your plan, Emma? Slowly destroy my marriage until David left me for you? Become Lily's stepmother? Move into my house and take over my life? I never wanted to hurt you, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. You stole my wedding earrings and wore them to my daughter's birthday party. You don't get to claim you didn't want to hurt me. This was the moment when Emma's mask finally slipped completely, revealing who she'd been all along. Fine, Emma said, standing up abruptly. You want the truth? David doesn't love you anymore. He hasn't for years. He stays because of Lily, but he's miserable. He's been miserable for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be happy until he met someone who actually appreciates him. Someone meaning you. Someone meaning me. I see who David really is. I support his dreams. I don't criticize him constantly or make him feel like he's failing as a husband and father. The accusations stung because they contained just enough truth to feel real. David and I had been struggling. Marriage with a young child was difficult. We had gotten into patterns of criticism and defensiveness that weren't healthy. But we'd been working on those problems. We'd been going to couples therapy. We'd been trying to reconnect. What I hadn't known was that David had been sharing our private struggles with the woman who was planning to replace me. So you decided to help him be happy by having an affair. I decided to help him remember what love feels like. Emma shot back. Real love. Not obligation disguised as marriage. In that moment, listening to my former best friend describe my marriage as an obligation, I realized that this wasn't just about an affair. It was about a systematic campaign to erase me. And what about Lily? I asked. What about your goddaughter who adores you? For the first time, Emma looked genuinely uncomfortable. Lily will understand someday. Children are more resilient than people think. She'll adjust. Adjust to her godmother stealing her father. Adjust to her father being with someone who makes him happy. The casual cruelty of that statement, the assumption that my daughter would simply accept the destruction of her family so that Emma could have what she wanted, made something snap inside me. Get out, I said quietly. Harper, get out of my house. Don't come back. Don't call. Don't text. You're no longer welcome in our lives. Emma's expression shifted from defensive to desperate. You can't just cut me out. I'm Lily's godmother. I've been part of this family for years. You were part of this family. Now you're just the woman who betrayed it. If you try to keep me away from Lily, I'll tell everyone how controlling and paranoid you've become. I'll tell them how you accused me of stealing your jewelry, how you've been checking up on David, how you've been acting crazy. She was threatening to use gaslighting and social manipulation as weapons, which told me everything I needed to know about how far she was willing to go. Do what you think is best, I said calmly, but do it from somewhere else. After Emma left, I sat in my living room listening to the recording of our conversation, understanding that I now had evidence of her admission to the affair, her timeline, and her threats. But more importantly, I had clarity about what I was dealing with. This wasn't a woman who'd made a mistake and felt remorseful. This was a predator who'd targeted my family and was now angry that her plan wasn't working as smoothly as she'd hoped. The difference between those two things would determine how I handled what came next. The final confrontation happened 3 days later, when David came home from work and found his suitcases packed and waiting by the front door. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is give someone exactly what they want and watch them realize they never really wanted it. What's this? David asked, staring at the luggage like it might disappear if he looked hard enough. Your things? I said calmly. I thought you might want them for your new living arrangement. Lily was at my sister's house for a sleepover, an arrangement I'd made specifically for this conversation. Whatever happened next, my daughter wouldn't witness the end of her parents' marriage. She'd already lost enough innocence at her birthday party. David set down his work bag slowly, his face cycling through confusion, concern, and dawning understanding. I watched him process the scene, the suitcases, my composed expression, the manila folder of legal documents sitting on the coffee table. Harper, what's going on? I know about Emma, I said simply. The blood drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. For a moment he looked like he might deny it, but something in my expression must have told him that denial was pointless. His shoulders sagged as if someone had cut the strings holding him upright. How long have you known? Long enough to document everything I need for the divorce. The word divorce hit him like a physical blow, and I watched 9 years of marriage die in his eyes. Harper, please, let me explain. I don't need explanations. I need you to leave. This is my house too. You can't just kick me out. Actually, I can. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Since you've been having an affair, and since I can prove it, you have no right to stay in the family home while we work out custody arrangements. I picked up the manila folder and pulled out several documents. I have photographs of your credit card statements showing charges at hotels during your supposed late meetings. I have recordings of Emma admitting to the affair and providing the timeline. I have testimony from neighbors who saw your car in my driveway when you were supposed to be at work conferences. David sank into the armchair where he'd sat thousands of evenings, watching TV with me and Lily, reading bedtime stories, planning family vacations. Now he looked like a stranger in his own living room. How did you find out? It doesn't matter how. What matters is that it's over. Harper, I love you. This thing with Emma, it was a mistake. It got out of hand. But it doesn't mean anything. He was trying to minimize 8 months of betrayal as a meaningless mistake, which told me everything about how little respect he had for our marriage. It meant enough for you to lie to me every day for 8 months. It meant enough for you to use our daughter as an alibi. It meant enough for Emma to wear my wedding earrings to Lily's birthday party like a trophy. David's head snapped up, genuine shock replacing his defensive posture. She wore your earrings? You didn't know? Your girlfriend didn't mention that she'd been stealing from me along with everything else? She's not my girlfriend, David said quickly, and I could hear the panic in his voice. It was just physical. It didn't mean anything emotional. The casual cruelty of that statement, reducing 8 months of betrayal to mere physical gratification, made me understand that this man wasn't the person I'd married. The David I'd fallen in love with would never have spoken about another woman with such callous dismissiveness. That's somehow supposed to make it better? That you risked our marriage, our family, our daughter's security for something that didn't even matter to you? I never meant for it to go this far, David said desperately, leaning forward in his chair like he was trying to physically reach me across the emotional distance that had opened between us. I was going to end it. I was confused. Marriage is hard, and with work stress and the baby years with Lily, we grew apart. And Emma was there, and she understood. Stop. I held up my hand, feeling my carefully maintained composure start to crack. I don't want to hear about how Emma understood you better than your wife did. I've heard that story already. David looked confused, his brow furrowing. You talked to Emma? She came to see me, to explain how unhappy you've been, how unappreciated you feel, how your marriage to me was just an obligation you've been trapped in for years. I never said that, David protested, but his voice lacked conviction. But you felt it. You shared our private struggles with the woman you were sleeping with. You discussed our couples therapy sessions, our financial stress, our parenting disagreements. You let her believe that she was saving you from a loveless marriage. Watching David realize that Emma had revealed more than he'd intended was almost satisfying enough to make up for the betrayal. Harper, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. We were already in counseling, David. You were discussing our marriage problems with your therapist on Thursday evenings and your girlfriend on Friday afternoons. You were taking the tools Dr. Martinez gave us to improve our communication and using them to justify your affair. David buried his face in his hands, and for a moment I saw the man I'd married, vulnerable, ashamed, broken. But that moment of sympathy passed quickly when I remembered all the times he'd come home from being with Emma and held me, kissed me, told me he loved me. I never wanted to hurt you, he said through his fingers. But you did hurt me. Every day for 8 months, you hurt me. Every time you lied about where you were, every time you came home and kissed me after being with her, every time you let me make plans for our future while you were planning to leave. I wasn't planning to leave? Then what were you planning? To keep both of us forever? To have your wife and your girlfriend and never have to choose? To let me raise our daughter while you played house with my best friend? David was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him trying to formulate an answer that would make his behavior seem reasonable. I don't know, he said finally. I wasn't thinking clearly. You weren't thinking about anyone but yourself. That admission, that he hadn't been thinking about me or Lily during 8 months of deception, was the final proof that our marriage was truly over. "What about Lily?" David asked, and I heard genuine pain in his voice. "She needs both her parents." "She'll have both her parents. She just won't have them in the same house anymore, and she'll have parents who are honest with her, even if we can't be honest with each other." "Harper, please don't do this. I'll end things with Emma. I'll do whatever you want. We can move past this." I looked at this man I'd loved for 9 years, this father of my child, this stranger who'd been living a double life in my house, and felt nothing but exhaustion and clarity. "The time for choices was 8 months ago, David. You made yours. Now I'm making mine. And your choice is divorce. My choice is to protect myself and our daughter from any more lies. My choice is to teach Lily that she deserves relationships built on trust, not deception." David left that night, carrying his suitcases to his car while I watched from the window. He moved slowly, like an old man, looking back at the house multiple times as if memorizing it. He didn't know where he was going, and I didn't ask. For the first time in 8 months, I knew exactly where my husband was sleeping. And it wasn't with me. 6 months later, I stood in the courtroom as our divorce was finalized, watching David sign papers that officially ended our 9-year marriage. Justice looked like 2 signatures on legal documents that gave me primary custody of our daughter and the house where she'd grown up. Emma wasn't there. She'd moved to another state 3 months earlier, after our mutual friends learned about the affair and stopped returning her calls. Turns out that stealing your best friend's husband isn't as socially acceptable as she'd hoped. The social consequences had been swift and devastating for her. Our college friends, the women from my book club, the mothers from Lily's school, once they learned what Emma had done, the invitations stopped coming. The group texts went silent. The birthday party invitations were rescinded. Emma had underestimated how much people value loyalty in friendship. She'd thought that if she spun the story right, painted me as a controlling wife, and herself as the supportive friend who'd helped David find happiness, people would understand. Instead, they understood exactly what she was: a predator who'd targeted a vulnerable marriage and destroyed a family for her own gratification. David looked older, tired, diminished as he sat across from me at the defendant's table. The affair that was supposed to make him happy had cost him his family, his home, and most of his friendships. Emma had ended their relationship within weeks of my discovering it, apparently deciding that a divorced teacher with custody payments wasn't the prize she'd been fighting for. Some people destroy everything they touch, and then wonder why they end up alone. But this story isn't really about David and Emma. It's about the woman I became when I discovered that the people I trusted most were the ones planning to hurt me. For 12 years, I'd defined myself through my relationships: as David's wife, as Emma's best friend, as the person who kept everyone else's life running smoothly while neglecting my own needs. I'd been the woman who made excuses for other people's bad behavior, who absorbed their stress and anxiety to keep the peace, who sacrificed my own comfort to make sure everyone else felt supported and loved. Sometimes betrayal is the gift that forces you to discover who you are when you stop being who everyone else needs you to be. In the months after David moved out, I learned things about myself that I'd never had the space to discover. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, more resilient than I'd imagined, and capable of protecting my daughter and myself from people who would harm us. I learned that I actually enjoy my own company, that my opinions matter, that my instincts are usually right even when other people try to convince me they're wrong. I learned that trust is earned, not assumed, and that love without respect is just manipulation wearing a prettier mask. Most importantly, I learned that some betrayals are actually liberations in disguise. The first few months were the hardest. Lily struggled with the change in routine, with Daddy living somewhere else, with the absence of Aunt Emma, who had disappeared from our lives without explanation. "Why doesn't Aunt Emma come over anymore?" Lily asked one evening while we were making dinner together. "Sometimes friendships change," I told her honestly, "and sometimes people make choices that hurt the people who love them." "Did Aunt Emma hurt you?" "Yes, sweetheart, she did." "Are you sad?" I considered the question carefully. I was sad, but now I'm mostly relieved that I don't have to pretend anymore. Lily adjusted better than I'd feared. Children are remarkably resilient when they feel secure, and removing the tension of a dishonest household actually made her happier. She sees David every other weekend and on holidays, and their relationship is loving but structured. Their father-daughter bond has actually improved since the divorce. Without the stress of maintaining lies and managing adult drama, David can focus entirely on being Lily's dad during their time together. She comes home from his apartment with stories about movies they've watched, parks they've visited, and conversations they've had. She's never asked about Emma. Children have an instinct for recognizing when people aren't safe. And I think she understood before I did that something wasn't right about her Aunt Emma's presence in our lives. The house feels different now, lighter, cleaner, more peaceful. I've redecorated Lily's room with colors she chose herself, updated the kitchen with appliances that actually work, and turned David's old office into a reading nook where Lily and I spend evenings with books and hot chocolate. I've painted over the scuff marks on the walls, replaced the worn carpet in the living room, and hung new pictures that reflect our life now instead of our life before. The house has become our sanctuary instead of a place where secrets were kept. I've also made new friends, real friends who support my growth instead of competing with my happiness. Women who understand that friendship means loyalty, honesty, and celebrating each other's success instead of plotting to steal it. These are friends who show up when they say they will, who remember important dates without keeping score, who offer help without expecting anything in return. I've learned the difference between friends who add to your life and friends who subtract from it, between people who want the best for you and people who want what's best for themselves. But the most important change isn't in my house or my social circle. It's in how I see myself. I used to believe that keeping other people happy was my job, that sacrificing my own needs was what love looked like, that questioning someone's behavior meant I was being paranoid or controlling. Now I understand that healthy relationships require boundaries, that trust must be earned through consistent actions, and that believing someone when they show you who they really are isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. I've learned to listen to the voice inside me that whispers warnings about people who seem too good to be true, situations that feel off, and relationships that require me to ignore my instincts to maintain peace. Most importantly, I've learned that my intuition is a gift, not a problem to be managed. If you're reading this because something feels wrong in your own relationships, please listen to your instincts. That uncomfortable feeling in your stomach, that sense that things don't add up, that voice telling you to pay attention. Trust it. Don't ignore red flags because you love someone. Don't make excuses for behavior that makes you feel uncertain or unsafe. Don't sacrifice your own peace of mind to keep other people comfortable with their lies. Most importantly, don't mistake loneliness for love or loyalty for stupidity. The people who truly love you want you to feel secure, not suspicious. They want to earn your trust, not manipulate it. They want to add to your life, not steal pieces of it for themselves. Emma taught me that some friends are just enemies who haven't revealed themselves yet. David taught me that some marriages are just prisons disguised as partnerships. But Lily teaches me every day that love doesn't have to hurt, that trust can be rebuilt, and that families created through choice can be stronger than families damaged by betrayal. 1 year after my divorce was finalized, Lily and I took a vacation to the beach. Just the two of us. On our last evening, we sat on the sand watching the sunset, and she turned to me with her 7-year-old wisdom. Mommy, are you happy now? I looked at my daughter, at the ocean stretching endlessly before us, at the life we'd built together from the ashes of betrayal, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace. Yes, baby, I said, pulling her close. I'm happy now. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I meant it completely. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was betraying you? How did you find the strength to protect yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength in betrayal and building better lives from broken trust. Remember, you deserve relationships that feel safe, not relationships that require detective work.